The scrap yard stretched endlessly under twin suns, a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams. Kira's hands bled as she dragged another piece of corroded plating toward her designated zone. 3 days. That's how long the Valerian Empire had given her to prove human worth, or she'd be shipped back to Earth in a containment pod marked genetic failure. The alien overseer chittered something in its clicking language. Kira didn't need translation. The meaning was clear in how it kicked a pile of the worst refuse toward her feet. Components so degraded even the recycling drones wouldn't touch them. Around her, other species worked with pristine materials. The insected Zarthax with their crystalline processors, the aquatic Nereids with living biocircuits. She got rust and death. Her fingers traced the edge of a shattered power core. Most would see garbage. She saw potential. Earth hadn't sent its best engineers to the Valerian proving grounds. They'd sent her, a self-taught mechanic from Detroit's industrial ruins, who learned to make miracles from nothing because nothing was all she'd ever had. The first cut opened her palm. Blood dripped onto the metal, and something inside the ancient core flickered. Impossible. These components were centuries dead, scavenged from ships that fell before humanity even reached its own moon. But Kira had learned long ago that impossible just meant nobody had tried the right way yet. She worked through the night, ignoring the pain, ignoring the mocking clicks from other contestants. The Valorians had designed this trial to humiliate Earth. Humanity's application to join the Galactic Council had been rejected 17 times. This was supposed to be the final rejection, the one that made humans give up and accept their place as a backwater species too primitive for the stars. By dawn, her hands were wrapped in torn fabric from her uniform. The pile of scrap had transformed into something that resembled a framework, though calling it elegant would be generous. It looked like a skeleton made by someone who'd never seen one, angular, wrong, but undeniably functional. The core components she'd salvaged pulsed with erratic energy she coaxed back to life through sheer stubborn refusal to let them stay dead. The overseer returned with its evaluation drone. The machine scanned her work and emitted a sound like breaking glass. Failure. Except the drone's sensors kept scanning, cycling through frequencies as if confused. The framework was operational, but it didn't match any known configuration in the Valerian database. That made it worthless by their metrics. Kira didn't argue. She just kept building. Day 2 brought new problems. The energy matrix she created was unstable, bleeding power faster than it generated. She needed a regulator, something to smooth the flow, but her scrap pile contained nothing remotely suitable. Around her, other contestants activated their projects, a Zarthax hive-mind processor that solved quantum equations in real time, a Nereid bio-ship that grew its own hull. Masterworks, all of them, built from the finest materials. She dug deeper into the refuse. Her fingers closed around something cold, something that made her skin prickle. A piece of dark matter containment field, cracked and leaking. Touching it was suicide. Using it was insanity. She pulled it free and began the delicate work of integrating it into her framework. The explosion came at midnight. Not large enough to kill, but enough to send her flying backward into a pile of shattered hull plating. Alarms shrieked across the yard. Drones converged on her position, ready to classify her as eliminated. She tasted blood and metal and defeat. Then she saw it. The explosion had fused 3 incompatible systems together in a way she'd been trying to achieve for hours. The dark matter leak, instead of destroying her framework, had created a stable bridge between the ancient power core and her makeshift energy matrix. The whole structure hummed with a frequency that made her bones ache. She laughed, wild and desperate, and went back to work. By day 3, word had spread. Contestants from other species stopped their own projects to watch the human covered in blood and burns building something from refuse that somehow refused to collapse. The overseer brought supervisors. The supervisors brought magistrates. Still, Kira worked, her vision narrowing to just the task, just the next connection, just the next impossible thing made possible. When the final bell rang, her creation stood complete. It wasn't beautiful. It looked like violence given form, all harsh angles and barely controlled energy. But when she activated it, the entire scrap yard went silent. The framework lifted into the air, hovering on a propulsion system that shouldn't exist. Every scanning drone in the facility locked onto it, trying and failing to categorize what they were seeing. It was a ship. It was a weapon. It was a power generator. It was all of those things, and none of them. Something entirely new built from the discarded pieces of 100 dead civilizations. The crowd parted. Kira's heart hammered as she saw why. Queen Velshera herself, supreme ruler of the Valerian Empire, walked through the scrap yard with her royal guard. She was massive, 9 feet of chitinous armor and predatory grace, her 4 eyes reflecting the light of Kira's creation. The queen stopped 3 feet away. For a long moment, she said nothing, just studied the hovering framework with an expression Kira couldn't read. The silence stretched until it became physical weight, pressing down on everyone present. When Velshera finally spoke, her voice carried across the entire yard. "Explain what I am seeing." Kira swallowed blood and pride and fear. "Potential, Your Majesty. That's what you're seeing. Everything here was deemed worthless. I proved that wrong." The queen's mandibles clicked slowly. "You have created something unprecedented from materials we considered beneath recycling. The energy signature is unstable. The design violates 47 principles of standard engineering. By every measure, this should not function. But it does." "Yes." The queen moved closer, circling the framework. Her guards tensed, hands on weapons, but she waved them back. "It functions in ways our finest engineers claim impossible. You have not simply repurposed refuse. You have created a new paradigm from it." One of the magistrates stepped forward, his translator crackling. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot be considering silence." The word cracked like a whip. Velshera's eyes never left Kira's creation. "How did you know to combine a dark matter containment field with a Prevalorian power core?" "I didn't know. I tried it because I had no other choice. And if it had killed you, then I would have failed." "Same as if I gave up." The queen's laugh was like stones grinding together. "Humanity's application has been rejected 17 times because we deemed your species too reckless, too chaotic, too unwilling to follow established protocols." She turned to face Kira directly. "I begin to see that we mistook desperation for recklessness, innovation for chaos, and determination for foolishness." She gestured to her guards. "Seize this creation. I want our top engineers to analyze every component." Kira's stomach dropped. They were taking it. Of course they were. Powerful species always took from the weak. That was the only universal law that mattered. But Velshera wasn't finished. "And you, human, you will explain to them exactly how you achieved this. Not as a prisoner. As a consultant." She paused, mandibles clicking in what might have been a smile. "The Galactic Council will hear a new proposal regarding humanity. I suspect they will find it difficult to refuse when presented with evidence that even our garbage becomes innovation in human hands." Kira's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the scrap pile, surrounded by the refuse she transformed, and, finally, let herself believe the impossible might actually be possible. The queen had already turned to leave when she stopped, looking back one last time. "What would you have built, I wonder, if we had given you proper materials?" Kira met those alien eyes and smiled through the blood and exhaustion. Give me the chance, and I'll show you. Velshera's laugh echoed across the scrapyard as she departed, leaving behind a silence that felt like the world holding its breath. Around Kira, the other contestants stared at the human who had turned their mockery into triumph, their certainty into questions. The Zarthax contestant approached first, its antennae quivering. You should not have succeeded. The statistical probability was essentially 0. Yeah, Kira agreed, looking at her bleeding hands, at the impossible thing she'd built from nothing. That's what makes us human. We're really good at doing things that should be impossible. She stood up, wincing at the pain, and looked at her creation hovering in the afternoon light. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, she'd have to explain her methods to alien engineers who thought in completely different paradigms. Tomorrow, humanity's future in the stars would be decided. But tonight, just for this moment, she let herself feel the victory. They'd given her garbage to break her spirit. Instead, she'd built a doorway to the stars. The scrapyard was quiet now, empty except for her and the thing she created from refuse and blood and sheer stubborn human will. She touched its surface gently, feeling the hum of energy beneath her fingers, and whispered the only truth that mattered. We're going to be okay. All of us. We're finally going to be okay. High above, the twin suns set on the Valerian Empire's greatest scrapyard, casting long shadows across the place where a human had proven that potential isn't given. It's made, one impossible piece at a time. The next morning brought changes. Kira woke in a proper quarters, not the contamination-controlled sleeping pod they'd assigned her initially. Her hands were bandaged with bioregenerative wraps that numbed the pain and accelerated healing. A guard stood outside her door, not to imprison her, but to escort her. The engineering complex occupied the heart of the Valerian capital ship, a floating city that dwarfed Earth's largest structures. Kira followed her escort through corridors that shifted and reformed around them, living architecture that responded to need and traffic flow. Everything was elegant, efficient, and completely alien. She felt like a cave dweller stepping into a future she couldn't comprehend. The chief engineer was a Valerian named Tekvar, smaller than the queen but no less intimidating. His workstation surrounded him in a sphere of holographic displays showing her creation from every angle, every spectrum, every mathematical model he could construct. It should not work, he said without preamble. The energy bleed alone should have caused catastrophic failure within seconds of activation. Kira studied the displays, seeing her creation reduced to numbers and theories. But it didn't. No. Because you did something here. He expanded a section showing the dark matter containment field. You introduced a harmonic resonance between the field decay and the power core oscillations. The bleed is not a flaw. It is an intentional pressure release that prevents cascade failure. I didn't calculate that. I just knew it needed to breathe. Tekvar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Frustration she was learning to recognize. You knew. Without theoretical foundation, without computational modeling, without any basis in established physics, you knew. Yes. He was silent for a long moment, displays flickering around him. Humans are either the most gifted intuitive engineers in the galaxy, or the most dangerous fools. Possibly both. Over the following weeks, Kira worked with Valerian engineers to document her methods. Except she didn't have methods, not in any way they understood. She worked by feel, by instinct, by a sense of how things should fit together that she couldn't explain because it had never been taught. It was just how her brain processed problems. The Valorians worked through rigid hierarchies of knowledge. Step 1 enabled Step 2, which permitted Step 3. Kira skipped steps, jumped hierarchies, connected things that had no business being connected. It drove them to distraction. But it worked. That was the maddening part for them. Her approach violated their principles, and it worked. Queen Velshera visited the engineering complex on the 19th day. Kira was elbow-deep in a prototype when the guards announced her presence. She tried to clean her hands, failed, and settled for a respectful nod that probably broke 6 protocols. "Show me," the Queen commanded. Kira activated the prototype. It was a scaled-down version of her original framework, refined with Valerian materials, but built on her fundamental design. The energy matrix pulsed with stable power, feeding propulsion systems that bent space around them in ways that made the monitoring equipment scream warnings. "We are calling it a probability engine," Tekvar explained. "It should not be possible to compress this much functionality into such a small space, yet here we are. The human's design ignores fundamental limitations by operating in the margins between established physical laws." Velshera studied the prototype with all 4 eyes. "Military applications? Extensive. A ship equipped with this technology could outmaneuver anything in our fleet. The energy efficiency exceeds our best systems by orders of magnitude. And if everyone has this technology?" The question hung in the air. Kira understood what the Queen was really asking. Technology changed balances of power. The Valerian Empire ruled through superior engineering and industrial capacity. If humanity could create this from garbage, what could they create with resources? "Then warfare changes," Kira said quietly, "like it always does when something new enters the equation. You understand the implications of what you have built. I understand that I built it from your garbage to prove humans deserve a chance. What you do with it now isn't in my control." Velshera's laugh rumbled through the complex. Honesty. How refreshing. She circled the prototype, her massive form somehow graceful despite its bulk. "The Galactic Council meets in 10 days. I will present your work and recommend humanity's admission. Some will oppose this. The Crithian Confederacy sees Earth as a potential resource world. The Ethereal Communion considers your species too violent. Others simply fear change. What do you see when you look at us?" The Queen stopped, considering. "I see a species that survived planetary near-destruction through determination and adaptation. I see engineers who make miracles from nothing because they never learned that miracles were impossible. I see potential that frightens me, because I do not know if that potential will be ally or threat." "We don't know either," Kira admitted. "We're still figuring out who we are out here. At least you are honest about your uncertainty. That is wiser than most species manage." Velshera turned to Tekvar. "Continue the analysis. I want full documentation before the council meets." She started to leave, then paused. "Your people sent you alone to face this trial. Why?" Kira thought of Earth, of the Detroit ruins, of everyone who told her she was wasting her life on impossible dreams. "Because they didn't think I could succeed. Sending me meant they could say they tried without risking anyone important. And now? Now I've succeeded, and they'll probably take credit for having faith in me all along." Velshera's mandibles clicked, amusement this time. "Politics is the one universal constant across all species. Remember that when you face the council. They will try to diminish your achievement, to claim it was luck or accident. You must stand firm." After the Queen left, Kira returned to her work, but her mind churned with anxiety. She'd proven herself to the Valorians. Now she had to prove humanity to the entire galaxy. The weight of that responsibility made her hands shake as she worked. Tekvar noticed. "Fear is reasonable. You carry your species' future. No pressure. If it helps, I opposed your presence here initially. I believed you would fail, possibly die, and create unfortunate diplomatic complications." He manipulated a display, showing energy flow patterns. "I was wrong. You succeeded through methods I still cannot fully comprehend. That makes you either brilliant or fortunate. Perhaps both. So you'll support humanity's admission? I will support evidence and results. Your work provides both. What the council decides politically is beyond my concern. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but, from a Valerian engineer, it might as well have been. Kira took what comfort she could and returned to work. The days blurred together. Sleep came in snatches between marathon sessions with engineers who wanted to understand every aspect of her design. They treated her with wary respect now, no longer dismissing her intuitive approach. Results spoke louder than methodology. On the 25th day, a Valerian guard arrived with new orders. Kira was to prepare for travel to the council station. She'd be presenting her work directly to the assembled species of the galaxy. The news hit her like a physical blow. Speaking to engineers was one thing. Speaking to the powers that controlled humanity's future was entirely different. The night before departure, she couldn't sleep. Her quarters window showed the Valerian capital ship's hangar, where thousands of vessels docked and departed in endless rhythm. So much activity, so much life, and Earth was barely a footnote in all of it. How could she convince beings who'd mastered star travel for millennia that humans deserved a place among them? A chime announced a visitor. Kira opened the door to find Queen Velshera standing there without her guard, an informality that shocked Kira into silence. "You are afraid," the Queen observed. Not a question. "Wouldn't you be?" "Yes. Fear before important events means you understand the stakes." Velshera entered without invitation, filling the small quarters with her presence. "I came to tell you something the council will not want you to know." Kira's pulse quickened. "What?" "Every species that joined the council faced trials designed to make them fail. The Zarthax were given political problems with no correct solution. The Nereids were isolated in desert environments. The trials reveal character, show how species handle impossible situations. Most pass through determination and protocol. You passed through innovation. You wanted to see if humans would break or adapt." "Exactly. And you did more than adapt. You created." "That frightens the established powers because creation implies change, and change threatens stability. So even if I present well, they might reject us anyway. Some will vote against humanity regardless of evidence. Others are undecided. Your presentation will tip that balance." Velshera moved to the window, looking out at the hangar. "I have ruled for 60 of your years. In that time, I have seen 3 species join the council, and 2 collapse before achieving admission. The ones who succeeded did so because they offered something the galaxy needed. And what does the galaxy need from humanity? Perspective. The council has grown complacent, comfortable with established ways. We solve problems through accumulated knowledge and proven methods. You solve problems by ignoring what should be impossible and doing it anyway." The Queen turned back to Kira. "Do not try to be what you think we want. Be what you are, stubborn, creative, unwilling to accept limitations. That is humanity's value." After Velshera left, Kira stood at the window for a long time, watching ships come and go. She thought of everyone on Earth who'd written her off, everyone who'd said humanity wasn't ready for the stars. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans were reckless and chaotic and too foolish to understand their own limitations. But maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The council station hung between dimensions, accessible only through jump gates that bent space into impossible geometries. Kira's stomach hadn't stopped churning since they'd made the transition, reality folding around their ship in ways that made her eyes water. The Valerian pilot seemed unbothered, navigating through mathematical impossibilities like they were routine traffic. When they docked, Kira got her first look at the true scope of galactic civilization. The station was a city, a country, a world unto itself. Hundreds of species moved through corridors designed to accommodate wildly different biologies. Gravity shifted between sections. Atmosphere composition changed. Some areas existed in different time flows to accommodate species with nonlinear perception. Tekvar met her at the airlock. The presentation is in 3 hours. I have prepared documentation of your work, but you will be answering questions directly. Some council members will be hostile. Do not let them provoke you into anger. I'm from Detroit. I know how to handle people who want me to fail. His mandibles clicked. This is not your city. These beings control the fate of worlds. Show respect even when they show you none. The preparation chamber was smaller than she'd expected. A simple room with display equipment and her prototype sitting on a secure platform. Kira ran through her presentation 17 times, refining words, adjusting explanations. None of it felt adequate. How could she explain intuitive engineering to beings who thought in pure mathematics? Queen Velshera arrived 30 minutes before the council session. You are ready? No. But I'll do it anyway. Good. That is very human. The queen moved to the prototype, examining it one last time. They will try to claim this is a fluke, that you cannot replicate the success. Have an answer prepared. I'll build something else. Right there, in front of them, from whatever materials they provide. Velshera's eyes widened slightly. That is either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. The council chamber was vast beyond comprehension, a sphere where gravity oriented toward the center, allowing representatives from hundreds of species to occupy positions around the entire surface. Kira stood at the focal point, visible to everyone, feeling like a specimen under examination. The Arbiter, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, opened the session. Its voice resonated directly in Kira's mind, bypassing language entirely. We gather to consider humanity's petition for council admission. Queen Velshera has presented unusual evidence in support. The human will now demonstrate her claims. Kira activated the prototype. It lifted smoothly, energy matrix pulsing with controlled power, propulsion systems bending space in miniature around it. The gathered representatives watched in silence as displays showed the energy efficiency, the power output, the fundamental impossibility of the design. This was built from refuse, Kira began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber. Materials the Valerian Empire had discarded as worthless. I was given 3 days, and no resources to prove human worth. This is what I created. A voice boomed from somewhere above her, a Crithian representative, built like an armored tank with grinding stone plates. We see a functional device. This proves engineering capability, nothing more. Many species possess such skills. Then, let me prove it wasn't luck. Kira had known this moment would come. Give me materials. Any materials, your choice. I'll build something new, right now, in front of this council. Shocked silence rippled through the chamber. The Arbiter's energy matrix flickered. This is highly irregular. So is judging an entire species based on one person. But here we are. Kira fought to keep her voice steady. You want to know what humanity can contribute? Let me show you. The council conferred in a dozen simultaneous conversations, voices overlapping in ways that made Kira's translator implant spark with feedback. Finally, the Arbiter spoke again. Very well. The ethereal communion will provide materials of their choosing. 3 containers materialized near Kira's platform. She opened them carefully, examining what she'd been given. Liquid crystal processors from technology 3 generations beyond Earth's capability. Bioneural circuits that grew their own connections. quantum entangled power cells that operated on principles she barely understood. It was a trap. They'd given her advanced materials specifically because humans shouldn't understand them, shouldn't be able to integrate them, shouldn't be able to create anything functional without years of study. The message was clear: prove you belong, or prove you don't. Kira smiled. They'd made the same mistake the Valorians had, assuming that not understanding something meant she couldn't work with it. She began with the bioneural circuits, watching how they grew and adapted. Living technology, responsive to stimulus. She introduced controlled electrical pulses, observing the patterns of growth, finding the rhythm of their development. The circuits responded, reaching toward her guidance like plants toward light. The liquid crystal processors were next. She couldn't read their data patterns, but she could see how energy moved through them, could trace the pathways of information flow. Where the bioneural circuits were organic and adaptive, the processors were rigid and precise. Opposite natures, incompatible by design. Unless she made them compatible. The quantum entangled power cells were the key. Their energy existed in superposition, not quite present in normal space. She used that quality to create a bridge, letting the power cells feed both systems simultaneously through quantum tunneling. The bioneural circuits provided adaptive pathways. The liquid crystal processors provided computational precision. The power cells kept both systems isolated while linking them through quantum entanglement. An hour passed. Then 2. The council watched in silence as Kira worked, blood welling from new cuts on her still healing hands, sweat dripping onto alien technology. She didn't explain, didn't justify, just built with the same desperate focus that had gotten her through the scrapyard trial. When she connected the final component, the resulting device pulsed with light that shifted through spectrums visible and invisible. It floated beside her prototype, similar in some ways, but fundamentally different. Where her first creation had been a framework, this was something more integrated, more elegant. "What have you built?" the Arbiter asked. "A translator. Not for language. We already have those." This translates intent, concept, understanding between different forms of consciousness. Kira activated it, and suddenly she could feel the Council's presence in a new way, could sense the Arbiter's curiosity, the Krithian's skepticism, Velshera's satisfaction. "You gave me incompatible technologies to prove I would fail. I made them work together by finding common ground through quantum bridging." She let that sink in, then continued. "That's what humanity can contribute. We don't have your knowledge or your technology. But we're very good at finding ways to make impossible things work together, because we've been doing it our entire history. We don't figure established paradigms because we've never had the luxury of paradigms. We just had problems that needed solving." The Krithian representative ground forward, creating gravitational distortions with its mass. Clever words. "But your species is violent, short-lived, unstable. You war among yourselves constantly. Why should we believe you can peacefully integrate into galactic civilization?" "Because we've learned from our mistakes," Kira said. "We've nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times and pulled back from the edge every time. We know what violence costs. We know what division costs. We're not asking to join the Council because we're perfect. We're asking because we're trying to be better, and we think being part of something larger than ourselves will help." An ethereal communion representative spoke, its voice like crystal singing. "You speak of peace, yet your prototype is easily weaponized. The propulsion system could be mounted on missiles. The energy matrix could power directed energy weapons. You have built a delivery system for destruction. I've built a tool. What you do with tools defines you, not the tools themselves. Every technology can help or harm. The question isn't whether something can be weaponized. Everything can. The question is whether the species using it chooses construction or destruction." Kira met what passed for the ethereal's eyes. Humanity chooses construction. We want to build, to grow, to be part of what you've created here. Velshera rose from her position, commanding attention through presence alone. The Council has heard evidence. This human has demonstrated not just capability but adaptability, not just knowledge but wisdom. She has proven that humanity possesses qualities we value: innovation, determination, and the willingness to face impossible challenges without surrender. You champion them because one human showed skill. The Crithian challenged. What are the billions more? What are their governments, their conflicts, their divisions? Every species in this council came from division. The Queen replied, the Zarthaks were 17 warring hive minds before unification. The Nereids nearly made their world uninhabitable through industrial contamination. My own people conquered through military force before choosing a different path. We judge species not on their past but on their trajectory. Humanity's trajectory points toward the stars and peace. The debate raged for hours. Kira stood at the center, answering questions, defending her species, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Some council members were convinced. Others remained hostile. The undecided asked increasingly complex questions, probing for weakness. Finally, the arbiter called for silence. We will vote. The question before the council: shall humanity be admitted as a probationary member species, with full admission contingent on successful integration over a trial period of 10 standard years? Lights began to glow throughout the chamber, green for approval, red for rejection, blue for abstention. Kira watched them flicker to life one by one, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Green, green, red, blue, green, red, red, green. The pattern scattered across the sphere without clear advantage. The final vote registered. The arbiter's matrix pulsed as it calculated. The motion passes by the minimum margin. Humanity is granted probationary council membership. Kira's legs gave out. She caught herself on the platform holding her creations, both hands gripping the edge hard enough to leave marks. They'd done it. Humanity had done it. She'd done it. Velshera approached as the council chamber began to empty, representatives returning to their worlds and concerns. You should feel proud. You achieved what many believed impossible. I'm too exhausted to feel anything. That will pass. Then, the real work begins. The Queen gestured to Kira's 2 creations. These will be studied, reverse-engineered, integrated into galactic technology. You have changed the trajectory of multiple civilizations, whether you realize it or not. I just wanted to prove we deserve a chance. You did more than that. You proved that limitation is often illusion, that refuse can become miracle, that the impossible is simply the not yet achieved. Velshera's mandibles clicked in what Kira had learned was approval. Your species will face many trials in the coming years. Not all will be as direct as what you faced. Politics, economics, social integration, all challenges without clear solutions. We'll figure it out. That's what humans do. The Queen's laugh rumbled through the chamber. Yes, I suspect you will. As Kira was escorted back to the Valerian ship, she caught a glimpse of Earth through one of the station's massive viewports. Her world, small and blue and impossibly precious, hanging in the darkness. Soon, the Council's announcement would reach home. Soon, everything would change. She touched the cold viewport, feeling the hum of the station around her, the presence of hundreds of species going about their lives in this impossible place humanity was now part of. Her reflection stared back, exhausted, bloodied, victorious. We made it, she whispered. We actually made it. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, no longer closed to humanity, no longer impossible dreams. Just destinations waiting to be reached, challenges waiting to be solved, miracles waiting to be built from whatever materials the universe provided. Kira smiled and turned away from Earth, toward the future, toward everything that came next. The scrapyard seemed like a lifetime ago, but its lesson remained crystal clear. Give humans nothing but garbage and impossible odds, and they'll build doorways to the stars. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not superior technology or ancient wisdom, but the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. In a universe governed by established rules and proven methods, sometimes what was needed most was someone willing to break those rules and prove that new methods were possible. The journey back to the Valerian capital ship passed in a blur of exhaustion and lingering adrenaline. Kira slept for 14 hours straight, her body finally crashing after weeks of sustained pressure. When she woke, everything had changed. Messages flooded her communication terminal. Earth's governments wanted conferences. Media outlets demanded interviews. Scientists requested technical specifications. Everyone who had ignored or dismissed her now wanted her attention, her time, her validation of their support that had never existed. She deleted most of it. Let them wait. Let them understand that humanity's future hadn't been secured by committees and politics, but by one person willing to bleed for the chance they'd carelessly thrown away. Tekvar visited her quarters on the second day after the vote. "You are now the most famous human in the galaxy. How does it feel?" "Exhausting. Fame usually is." He set down a data pad. "The Council has formally requested your assistance in establishing Earth's integration protocols. They want you to help design the framework for how humanity joins galactic civilization." Kira picked up the pad, scrolling through the requirements. Infrastructure development, cultural exchange programs, technological transfer agreements, defense coordination. Hundreds of details, each one critical, each one a potential point of failure. "They want me to build another impossible thing. You have demonstrated capability for exactly that." Tekvar's mandibles clicked. "Though you will not be alone. The Valerian Empire is assigning a support team. And Queen Velshera has personally volunteered to serve as humanity's sponsor during the probationary period." "Why would she do that?" "Because she believes in potential over precedent. Also, I suspect she finds your species entertaining." He manipulated the data pad, highlighting specific sections. "You will need to return to Earth soon. The Council requires face-to-face meetings with your governmental representatives." The thought of going home filled Kira with complicated emotions. She'd left as an expendable test subject, a throwaway option. Now she was returning as the architect of humanity's greatest achievement. Some people would celebrate her. Others would resent her success, would claim she'd gotten lucky, would try to take credit or tear her down. "I'm not a politician," she said quietly. "No. You are an engineer who builds bridges between impossible things. That is precisely what Earth needs now. Someone who can connect your species to galactic civilization despite all the incompatibilities." Over the following weeks, Kira worked with Valerian experts to develop Earth's integration plan. It was like building in the scrapyard again, except instead of metal and circuits, she was working with cultures and economies and political systems that had no business being compatible. The key, she realized, was the same principle that had guided her engineering: find the common ground, bridge the gaps, and accept that the result wouldn't look like anything that came before. Earth's governments wanted immediate access to advanced technology. The Council wanted humanity to develop organically, earning each advancement. Kira proposed a hybrid system. Humans could access Council technology only by demonstrating equivalent understanding, turning advancement into an educational framework rather than simple transfer. Some Council species worried about Earth's military capabilities. Some Earth nations demanded the right to defend themselves. Kira designed a defense coordination system where human forces worked alongside Council peacekeepers, learning galactic combat doctrines while maintaining sovereignty. Cultural exchange was the hardest part. Humanity was one species, but hundreds of distinct cultures. The Council was hundreds of species, each with their own internal diversity. Creating frameworks for meaningful interaction without forced homogenization took months of careful work. Through it all, Queen Velshera provided guidance and support. She understood galactic politics in ways Kira never would, knew which council members needed careful handling and which responded to direct approaches. Without her intervention, the integration plan would have collapsed a dozen times. "You are learning," the Queen observed during one particularly difficult negotiation session. "When you arrived, you thought only in terms of engineering. Now you see that civilizations are also things that can be built, broken, or bridged. I preferred working with metal. It doesn't have opinions, but it also cannot surprise you with unexpected potential." People, for all their frustrations, can exceed what you design for them. 6 months after the council vote, Kira returned to Earth. The shuttle descended through familiar atmosphere, passing over oceans and continents she thought she might never see again. Detroit looked different from orbit, still scarred by its industrial past, but somehow more hopeful than when she'd left. They'd built a landing facility specifically for this arrival, a statement that humanity was ready to receive the stars. Crowds gathered despite the cold, thousands of people wanting to witness history. Kira saw their faces through the viewport and felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. The shuttle touched down with barely a tremor. Kira stood, straightened her Valorian-made uniform, and prepared to face her species as their representative to the galaxy. Queen Velshera had wanted to attend, but Kira had asked her to wait. This moment needed to be human, needed to be about what Earth had achieved, not about alien validation. The hatch opened. Cold Detroit air rushed in, carrying the smell of snow and old concrete and home. Kira stepped out onto the platform to thunderous applause, to cheers and tears and celebration that echoed across the facility. Earth's Secretary General waited at the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by politicians and media and all the apparatus of governmental power. He smiled broadly, arms open in welcome. "Kira, on behalf of all humanity, let me express our deep gratitude for your extraordinary achievement." She shook his hand, feeling the cameras recording every moment, and remembered that this man had signed the order sending her to the Valerian trials with an internal memo calling it acceptable risk with minimal downside. She remembered a lot of things these politicians had said and done when they thought humanity had no real chance. "Thank you, Secretary General. I'm glad I could prove humanity's worth to the Council." She kept her voice even, professional, giving them nothing they could use against her. The press conference was carefully orchestrated, every question pre-approved, every answer designed to present Earth's government in the best possible light. Kira played along because she had to, because starting conflicts now would undermine everything she'd built. But she made mental notes of who took credit, who implied they'd always believed in her, who tried to minimize her achievement. Later, alone in her temporary quarters, she stared out at Detroit's skyline and felt the familiar anger rising. They hadn't believed. They hadn't supported her. They'd thrown her away and only wanted her back now that she'd succeeded despite them. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find a young woman, maybe 20, wearing a Detroit Community College engineering program jacket. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, nervous and excited. "I know you're busy, but I had to meet you. I'm Sarah. I watched your council presentation. I study engineering because of people like you who prove we can do impossible things." Kira felt her anger drain away. This was why it mattered. Not the politicians or the credit takers, but the people who saw her achievement and thought maybe they could achieve impossible things too. "What are you studying?" she asked. "Renewable energy systems. I want to help transition Earth to Council-compatible power grids." Sarah pulled out a battered notebook. Would you sign this? You're the reason I stayed in school when everyone said I was wasting my time." Kira signed the notebook, and they talked for an hour about engineering and dreams and the future. When Sarah finally left, her smile bright enough to light the city, Kira felt something shift inside her. The politicians didn't matter. The credit takers didn't matter. What mattered was this: inspiring the next generation to reach for impossible things. Over the following months, Kira traveled across Earth, meeting with engineers and scientists and students. She avoided most political events, focusing instead on the people who would actually build humanity's future. She shared technical specifications freely, helped universities develop galactic-compatible curricula, and worked with industrial designers to start adapting Earth's manufacturing to Council standards. Queen Velshera visited 6 months into the integration period, her ship landing in Geneva for formal diplomatic ceremonies. The Queen's physical presence on Earth caused appropriate awe. She was massive, powerful, undeniably alien. But she'd learned to modulate her behavior for human comfort, and the state dinner proceeded without major incidents. Kira sat beside her, feeling strange wearing formal clothes instead of engineering coveralls. "How are we doing?" she asked quietly. "The integration, I mean." "Better than most expected. Worse than you hoped." Velshera sampled human cuisine with polite interest. "Your species has enthusiasm but lacks patience. You want immediate results from processes that take generations. That's very human. Yes, it will cause problems eventually, but it also drives you to achieve things other species would consider too difficult to attempt." The Queen turned one of her eyes toward Kira. "I have a proposal for you. The Council is establishing an Integration Oversight Committee. I want you to chair the human delegation. I'm not qualified for that. I'm an engineer, not a diplomat. You built a framework for integration from incompatible components. That is exactly the qualification needed." Velshera's mandibles clicked. "The committee will face opposition from both sides: Council species who think humanity is advancing too quickly, and humans who think the Council is too restrictive. You understand both perspectives." Kira wanted to refuse. She wanted to go back to engineering, to building things with her hands instead of navigating political complexities. But she thought of Sarah and the thousands like her, people counting on humanity's integration to succeed so their impossible dreams could become possible realities. "I'll do it," she said. "But I'm doing it my way. No political games, no careful diplomatic language. We're going to build this integration properly, and that means being honest about what works and what doesn't. I would expect nothing less." The Integration Oversight Committee became Kira's new scrapyard, a collection of incompatible elements she had to make function together. Council representatives who'd voted against humanity attended every meeting, looking for failures to justify their skepticism. Human delegates brought their own agendas, their own ideas of how integration should proceed, their own resistance to doing things the galactic way. Kira ran the committee like she'd built devices: find the core function, eliminate unnecessary components, connect things that needed connecting even if conventional wisdom said they were incompatible. It was messy and inefficient, and it drove traditional diplomats to distraction, but it worked. Problems arose constantly. A Zarthax trade delegation was insulted by human business practices. An earth mining company violated Council environmental protocols. A cultural exchange program accidentally exposed human children to near-it entertainment designed for a completely different psychology. Each crisis threatened to derail the entire integration. Kira handled them the way she'd handled the scrapyard, by refusing to accept that problems were unsolvable. She found common ground, built bridges, created solutions from the incompatible pieces of each situation. Sometimes it meant defending humanity's choices to skeptical council members. Sometimes it meant forcing Earth governments to accept that their way wasn't the only way. 3 years into the probationary period, the council conducted its first formal review. Kira stood once again in the great chamber, but this time she wasn't alone. A full human delegation surrounded her: scientists, diplomats, engineers, educators. People who'd spent 3 years working to prove humanity deserved its place among the stars. The Arbiter's matrix pulsed as it presented the review findings. Humanity has demonstrated substantial progress in integration. Technology transfer protocols are functioning adequately. Cultural exchange programs show promise despite early difficulties. Defense coordination has proceeded without major incidents. However, a Krithian representative interjected, incidents of protocol violation remain elevated. Human tendency toward independent action continues to create friction with established galactic norms. Kira had been expecting this. Respectfully, Council Member, friction creates heat, and heat can forge stronger bonds. Yes, humans make mistakes. Yes, we challenge protocols that don't make sense to us. But we also innovate, we adapt, we find solutions that established norms miss. Isn't that exactly why you accepted us? You were accepted, the Krithian ground out, on the promise of potential. Potential must eventually become proven capability. Then, look at what we've proven. Kira activated displays showing 3 years of human achievement. Joint human Malorian engineering projects that had created new technologies. Human medical research that had found cures for diseases affecting multiple council species. Earth's cultural contributions that had enriched galactic understanding. We're not trying to be just like you. We're trying to be the best version of ourselves while being part of something larger. The review continued for hours, examining every aspect of integration. Some council members praised humanity's progress. Others pointed to failures and setbacks. The undecided asked questions, probing for evidence that would justify their vote either way. When the final assessment came, it was neither complete approval nor rejection. Humanity's probationary status was extended with the recommendation that full membership be granted after 2 more years, contingent on continued progress. Not the victory Kira had hoped for, but not the failure she'd feared. Queen Velshera approached after the session ended. Disappointed? I wanted full membership now. Of course you did. You are human. You want immediate results. The Queen's mandibles clicked. But consider what you have achieved. 3 years ago, your species was unknown to most of the galaxy. Now you are recognized as valuable contributors to Council civilization. That transformation happened because you refused to accept limitations. Kira looked at her delegation, at the humans who'd worked themselves to exhaustion proving their worth. We're going to make it, aren't we? Full membership, being truly part of this. If you maintain your current trajectory, yes. Though the path will not be easy. Some council members will always oppose you. Some humans will always resist galactic integration. The work of bridging incompatible things is never finished. Sounds like job security for an engineer who specializes in impossible connections. Velshera's laugh rumbled through the chamber. Indeed. 5 years after Kira had stood in a scrapyard bleeding onto dead technology. 5 years after she'd built a doorway to the stars from refuse and desperation, humanity received full council membership. The vote was overwhelming this time. Even former opponents acknowledged what Earth had achieved. Kira stood in the council chamber for the formal ceremony, older now, scarred by years of impossibly hard work, but unbowed. When the Arbiter declared humanity a full member species of the Galactic Council, when the chamber erupted in approval from hundreds of species, she thought of that scrapyard, of those 3 days that had changed everything. They'd given her garbage to break her. Instead, she'd built a bridge between worlds. After the ceremony, as celebrations erupted across Earth and throughout human settlements on a dozen worlds, Kira found a quiet observation deck on the council station. She stood alone, looking out at the galaxy humanity was now truly part of, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had been achieved. Queen Velshera found her there. "You should be celebrating with your people." "I will. I just needed a moment to remember where we started. In a scrapyard, facing impossible odds." "Yeah. Feels like a lifetime ago." Kira turned to face the Queen. "Thank you. For seeing potential when you could have seen only garbage. For supporting us even when we frustrated you. For being the friend humanity needed. You earned that friendship by proving your worth every single day for 5 years. I simply provided the opportunity." Velshera moved to stand beside her, looking out at the stars. "What will you do now? Your contract with the Integration Committee ends with full membership. I'm going back to engineering. Real engineering, building things with my hands. The galaxy gave me politics and diplomacy by necessity, but my heart belongs to making impossible things work. The galaxy will miss your unique approach to solving problems. The galaxy has millions of problem solvers. It only has one me doing what I do best." Kira smiled. "Besides, humanity has a lot of young engineers now who watched me build miracles from garbage. They're ready to create their own impossible things. My job is done." They stood together in comfortable silence, human and alien, looking out at the future they'd built together from incompatible pieces and sheer stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't work. Somewhere in the Detroit ruins, a young engineer named Sarah was probably looking up at these same stars, dreaming her own impossible dreams. And because of what Kira had proven, because of the doors she opened, those dreams were no longer impossible. They were just the next things waiting to be built. Human potential, Kira had learned, wasn't about starting with the best materials or the most knowledge or the easiest path. It was about looking at garbage and seeing possibility, about facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender, about building bridges between incompatible things because the connection mattered more than the difficulty. The galaxy had given humanity garbage to test their worth. Humanity had built the stars. And that, Kira thought as she finally turned away from the viewport to join the celebrations, was the most human thing of all.